Good morning and welcome to the next edition of the Morning Cup of Joe. I am joined today by Sara Bonney, Director of Marketing and Communications, but more importantly, the in-house expert on everything marketing. So we're so fortunate to have you join us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and she's also an Iowa Falls native, Hardin County area, so a quick shout out to that part of the state.
Yay, Tam.
Yeah. So I asked Sara today to come on and talk about marketing and what are just maybe 1, 2, and 3 simple ways to effectively reach out to your community about your local community foundation. And so she had a few ideas that she wanted to share, and so I'll turn it over to you, Sara.
Absolutely. When we market the Community Foundation of Greater Des Moines, a lot of what we do is storytelling. As you know, our work can seem complicated.
Right.
And when you're trying to give the quick pitch to a donor or a nonprofit. So if you have a story in your back pocket that you can use to highlight that work, it has more impact to that person. They're more likely to remember it, they'll connect with it. And if it's someone that's willing to share their name, maybe that's someone that's a nice local tie or a good way to build your reputation. We work with so-and-so, they trust us, you can trust us as well.
Right.
So stories are a really great way to talk about your work. And something I like to think about too, and when you think about stories, is when you go to that, lunch at church, or if you're going to your family Thanksgiving and somebody says, well, what do you do? What's your work? This is your quick, easy story that you can share and highlight what you do.
Right, because it's almost like allowing people to see themselves inside the story.
Exactly.
So if you're talking to a small business owner about legacy giving, if you have a story about someone that's gone through that same experience, tell them that story so they can see themselves within it. So when you collect a story, I mean, do you need a novel, or what are the basics you need from a good story?
Yeah, good question. Short and sweet. We will write stories for our annual report that are 200 words, and that's really the longest story we ever write.
Okay.
When we're thinking about social media posts, one single quote is fine.
Okay.
So don't feel like you have to be overwhelmed by collecting this lengthy story. Something quick, brief, think about your audience a little bit. And not only do you want to use the story when you're, it's a social media post, or if it's an opportunity to put on your website, or if it's a brochure, but also think about at your board meetings. Do you start your board meeting with a story so that your donors, so your board members also hear that story and that's something they can use? So these are stories that can live on in lots of different ways.
That's a great point. So you mentioned social media. Give us a quick basics on, how often should you post? What's like the main platform you should be using? Are there places you can go and take ideas for social media?
Yeah. The biggest rule in my mind with social media is whatever you're using, use it. If you have a Twitter account but you're really not using it or not posting on it, maybe consider not using that resource. We use Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn at the Community Foundation of Greater Des Moines, but that's really up to you, what makes sense from a time perspective. As far as how often, if you can do once a week, that's fantastic. If you can do a couple of times a week, that's great. And don't feel like that content has to be developed by yourself all the time. So if there's an interesting article in your local paper, you can share that, and it shows you're connected to the community. Or if you see something that we post, share that, or another community foundation, or just a general philanthropy post. Don't feel like you're creating all this content yourself.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be original.
Exactly.
Good.
And you can reuse.
Yeah.
So if you've posted something at year end last year, post it again. Or if you've got a great donor story that makes sense to share, once a month, that's fine too.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. We always talk about it's not worth doing a lot of things mediocre. It's about doing a few things really, really well. And so I think social media would be the same thing. The last thing I want to ask you about, so we have these stories, we have social media, but local media is very trusted. Talk to us a little bit about how do we build relationships with those local media contacts?
Absolutely. It's just like when you were building a relationship with a donor. It's getting to know them, it's staying in communication with them. Really, you want to just be a resource so that you can go to them and they can trust you when you say, hey, we have these grants that we're announcing, or we're accepting applications, or it's year-end giving. Can we share with your readers or listeners, whatever it might be, some helpful tips as experts in the field? So you just want to have that ongoing relationship so that they know they can trust you and that you're a good resource for information.
Yeah, it might lead to opportunities, maybe quick little 30-second commercials on the radio or quick little interviews. We don't want to forget about the different mediums of media within our community. So.
And don't be hesitant to submit as well. If you have an event where you're doing check presentations, take a picture of that, see if you can submit that to your local local newspaper, post it on your social media, things that a lot of you are already doing, but just keeping up that good work.
That's awesome. The last thing I want to wrap up on is we are going to do a new marketing campaign for affiliates focused on professional advisors, really trying to educate them about Endow Iowa, about Keep Iowa Growing, and other ways donors can give through the Community Foundation. And so you'll see an email about that coming out very soon. But Sara is doing a great job, and she's going to help do some personal branding for affiliates that want to opt into that strategy. And so I really appreciate her time on that. But Sara, thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. Long-time viewer, first-time participant.